In an astonishing exchange with former head of Cobra, Colonel Richard Kemp, Nicky Campbell, inexplicably, says he met some people in Manchester yesterday who blame the government for the attack. Now, why Campbell threw this in, I have no idea. I am gobsmacked. He was on location. He's live with a small rig at Albert Square in Manchester. Head office is at Salford Quays. I'm guessing producers don't have Campbell's ear, and I think he lost the run of himself for a minute. I'm going to play you the entire exchange, including the response from Colonel Richard Kemp. This was on BBC Radio 5 Live today.
Just on the edge of the square, there was two young Muslim guys who weren't part of this, but when I was coming in last night, I was mentioning it earlier on. And this is symptomatic of a problem with some people and the lack of critical thinking that we hear all about. They came up to me and I actually said, what do you think of it all? Because I had a microphone, I thought I might interview them. And they said, it was the government that did it. A wry smile comes to your face. You've heard it before.
I have many times.
What on earth puts somebody in a situation that they lack the ability to think critically and they just do not trust anything?
Well, I think you've got to put it down. A lot of it, you've got to put it down to their leaders, the community leaders. Shortly after 9/11, I held a meeting with a series of very, very high-level imams from the north of England. These are very senior people, old men, wise. They weren't by any means stupid, and they were telling me earnestly and believing it that 9/11 had been carried out by the CIA and also supported by Israeli intelligence. These people believe that, and I think it's in a way it's responsible for a large element of the situation we've got now.
And the leader of Birmingham Central Mosque, Nassim, I do apologise, I can't remember his name right now. He said that 7/7 was a set-up as well. I mean, he was a community leader.
Of course, and we have to tackle these people because some of these radical preachers, and I'm not saying the one you spoke about is necessarily a radical preacher, but some of these radical preachers are sowing these seeds.
Those are two young guys, actually.
Right, well, they're sowing seeds into those young guys' heads.
We have to tackle people with opinions about September the 11th and the 7th of July. Sowing seeds into people's heads. Listen to the rest of it. It's only a couple of seconds more.
Those young guys' heads. And we need to look at those individuals. Many of them are brought over from Pakistan, in countries or in areas that despise the UK. We need to look at what they're saying in the mosques. And if they be deported, they should be deported.
All right. Many of them are English. Many of them are white English people. Many of them are white Irish people who believe that the 7th of July was orchestrated by British intelligence, who believe that US and Israeli intelligence were complicit in the attacks on September the 11th. But anyway, if anybody is saying that these things were inside jobs, they can be deported, they should be deported, says Colonel Richard Kemp. We've heard this before. There's so much to dissect from that exchange that I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start here. Did you laugh out loud when you heard Nicky Campbell talk about critical thinking? I'm guessing you probably did.
This is symptomatic of a problem with some people and the lack of critical thinking that we hear all about. They came up to me and I actually said, what do you think of it all? Because I had a microphone, I thought I might interview them. And they said, it was the government that did it. A wry smile comes to your face. You've heard it before.
I have many times.
What on earth puts somebody in a situation that they lack the ability to think critically and they just do not trust anything?
Yeah, what makes people put themselves in a situation where they do not trust anything? I won't labour the point, it's too easy. The irony of a BBC journalist, in inverted commas, expressing incredulity at the lack of critical thinking. BBC presenter expressing incredulity at the lack of critical thinking. If memory serves, wasn't it Campbell's station that told us, you and me, that Building 7 had collapsed in New York City before it actually had? It was still there. It was visible in the background. Where was the critical thinking then, eh? Where was the critical thinking? And why would those young men think like that? Interestingly enough, Campbell didn't interview the young men. He said, I was going to interview them. Why didn't he? Why didn't he? I thought the BBC was open. I thought the BBC was an investigative, was about educating was about informing as well as entertaining. Why didn't they interview the two young men to ask them why they thought the government was behind it? Why didn't you, Nicky? Why didn't you interview them? Why would those young men think that about September the 11th and about the 7th of July? Maybe, just maybe, it's because on the 7th of July 2005, a UK defence contractor called Peter Power went on ITN television live not long after the bombs to say that amazingly there was a drill going on in the exact same stations that were bombed, and the drill was imagining the exact same scenario even that unfolded. Staggering.
Today we were running an exercise for a company, bearing in mind I'm now in the private sector, and we sat everybody down in the city, 1,000 people involved in the whole organisation, but the crisis team, and the most peculiar thing was we based our scenario on the simultaneous attacks on the underground and mainline station. So we had to suddenly switch an exercise from fictional to real. And one of the first things is, get that bureau number. When you have a list of people missing, tell them. And so it took a long time.
Just to get this right, you were actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Advisor Consultants. We specialise in helping people to get their crisis management response. How do you jump from slow time thinking to quick time doing? And
Yes, almost precisely. We were working on an exercise today at the stations that were bombed, exactly the same stations, imagining the exact same scenario. Quite amazing, really, when you think about it, isn't it? Quite amazing.
And we chose a scenario with their assistance which is based on a terrorist attack because they're very close to a property occupied by Jewish businessmen. They're in the city, and there are more American banks in the city than there are in the whole of New York.
Yeah, Jewish businessmen and banks. That's why we envisaged the exact same scenario with the same result. That was the script. We were playing that. We were doing this big drill, and it went live. Isn't that kind of extraordinary? Kind of amazing.
Today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Advisor Consultants. We specialise.
Now, where did those crazy young Muslim men get those ideas, eh? Where did they get those ideas out of? Where did they come up with these ideas that the government was behind September the 11th and the 7th of July? And I think I often look back at the 7th of July because there's never been a false flag terror event openly admitted on national television like the 7th of July, which was perpetrated on the people of London by British intelligence. Wonderful.